Well, good afternoon. It's sort of changed to the programme as advertised due to time constraints. But I'm hoping that we're going to introduce you to some quite interesting people and tell you one or two bits about the beach you may not know. You'll notice that all these stars are there simply so that when I run over time I can actually get out of where I am. Right, what I want you to do is to imagine you're in a time when there are no telephones, gramophones are not that old, and you're in a place where amenities are very, very few. And that life is very, very basic. That's what people chose. So we are going to go, hopefully, to the far end of the beach, about as far as you can go, to a place called Lamorna, which was one of the last bungalows. Bungalows were weird things. Once they were built, quite often they disappeared quite quick and were replaced with another bungalow by a different name. So you can actually start to go quite berserk trying to put the right names to the right bungalows. Okay, so from Lamorna was the last one, then we get Beechcroft, round to Kittiwake. Kittiwake's quite interesting because in 1911 it was the first bungalow to burn down. And a lot of people turned up to watch it burn down. We're going to start around here with this lovely castellated place called Rhodesia. We'll see that Rhodesia had quite an interesting life. Next door to that is Gull's Nest. The Gull's Nest was originally reported to be one of the first bungalows on the beach, but that's not quite true because it's not there. We're looking at a time when we're going from the 1890s right through to 1913. Gull's Nest doesn't appear until slightly later on. And then we've got Seaview. Seaview incorporated the very first hut which was on the beach. That was fisherman Sam Maple set up his hut on the beach, used it for his fishing tackle, and eventually decided to use it as a sort of weekend away from home, if you like. And then the last bungalow, Coronation, that's of some significance because the bungalows themselves were built under Sam's direction by Tom Lee and John Stiniford. And Tom Lee ended up living in Sea Spray and Coronation. Quite a few families had blocks on the beach. There's one block of 20, so we're actually talking about once we started to build bungalows on the beach, we got people in there that realised that as it became popular as a place away from anywhere, it would be the ideal place to cash in on real estate. Right, if we're looking from the Lancing Inn, we come up, and obviously Rhodesia is very obvious. So it grew from Sam's first bit into what was the biggest settlement, if you like, of its type in the world. So it went from 11 dwellings in 1897, 120 in 1900, and then according to the Worthy Gazette, 200 in 1909. So we're talking about a very short strip of street single which has got dense bungalows on it. Bit of a problem if yours goes up in smoke, particularly if the bloke in the next one's actually living in London and only comes down on weekends. Okay, so this is where it all began then. Lazy Land, the very first occupied bungalow. It was built for the Ertzman brothers, who had a furniture business up in London, and I dare say, looking at the interiors of some of these bungalows, that they made an absolute killing selling furniture to people on the beach. Quality furniture. But the one I'm going to focus on is Gull's Nest. This is Rhodesia. Rhodesia has a special sort of, it was a hotel. But not only that, it was the first strip club on the beach. Now we're talking about, if you lived over here on the mainland, the first thing you did was buy a telescope. There were bathing stations set up on the beach and all sorts of things, but in the period we're talking about, it was all skinny dipping and night sitting out having your pina colada on the balcony or whatever. It was quite public. I mean, there was only one way on the beach at that time, unless you could swim across. You had to go a very long way round. People were very protective. Obviously, it was neighbourhood watch operated quite strongly because a lot of people didn't live there. They came down at weekends, and so obviously, this business of guarding each other's property was foremost in people's minds. However, Rhodesia burnt down in 1923, the area we're talking about, and then it got rebuilt as Castle Dean, where you can see why it became Castle Dean, can't you? Because it was a castle. So there you go. If you wanted a good night out and a bit of female entertainment, then obviously that was the place to go. So this is an unusual thing because we're actually looking behind them now. This is Rhodesia, and there is Gold's Nest. I put in Gold's Nest because Gold's Nest was one of the earlier bungalows, and it was very large and very spacious. It belonged to the Dyer Smith family. Mr. Dyer Smith, Stanley, had been a riding instructor in London, and he had a fall off a horse, severely damaged his back, and decided to move down near the coast. His wife wasn't particularly well at the time, so it was an ideal place to go for convalescence and so on. You can see that it's one of the more unusual ones because apart from being a large bungalow, it's actually got, I don't know what you would call it, verandas all the way around the thing. This is an interesting picture. Eddie knows all about this one because in 1996, when they were celebrating 100 years of the cinema, we were over at the Church of Good Shepherd, and there was a little old lady clutching some sepia photos, and nobody really wanted to take any notice of her at all. But Eddie and I, being Eddie and I, went over and spoke to her, and found out that her name was Joan Dyer Smith. That's this young lady with an enormous bow in her hair. And we were invited out to her place in Worthing, and we were told all about the family and all about the beach, and she brought out all sorts of wonderful things. And so I thought, right, we'll start with this family because they're actually quite interesting. So there we are. This is a picture that a lot of people see, probably don't understand. They're actually by Gold's Nest. This is Joan as a young girl. This is Joan's mother. I think it's Louisa. And that's Stanley, bit of a character. And then we've got the Engelbachs. The church was built in 1913. After 1910, there were major storms. The beach was completely devastated. Some bungalows were rebuilt, some weren't. There were empty blocks. And then again, 1913, an even worse storm. They had built a bank, and the bank had got breached, and that breach had allowed the sea to wash all the bungalows over into Wywater. And so there we've got the Reverend Engelbach and his wife. They were quite good entertainers. Now from this picture you can see that at this time they made their own entertainment, and some had a show business background, all sorts of aspects of show business. Some were musicians, some were theatre, directors and so on, and so it became quite a close-knit thing, and they all took turns in particular kinds of amusements and entertainments. So there we are, there's Gold's Nest. This was one of the, fortunately enough, she had a couple of these copies spare, so we got one in. 1907, then the Home Handbook suggests that Gold's Nest might have been the first bungalow, but it wasn't actually. It was Lazyland, the bungalow next door. So it wasn't one of the first 10 or 11 dwellings in 1896. So it's been there a long time, but not as long as people thought. You notice it's got all this concrete around it. That was built by Sam Maple after the 1913 storm. Their back garden was probably one of the best protected from the sea. There we are, about 1923 then. Gold's Nest and 3 other bungalows burnt down. So Dyer Smith lost his home. That didn't deter him, because he built it up again. These pictures were taken, this is the interior of Gold's Nest. What had happened is they took the furniture out of Gold's Nest, and it was stored over it with pages. Some of it they were a bit annoyed because it went missing. The interesting thing is that when Eddie and I went to Jones, a lot of this stuff was actually around her flat, so it was still there. But these pictures were used for insurance purposes, so that you could see what was inside. Lovely old coal scuttle. You notice the oil lamps. Now they were one of the biggest bones of contention, because when bungalows burnt down, they weren't always burnt down for legitimate reasons, and it was always, my son came home absolutely blacko and kicked over the oil lamp, and they probably heard that 3 or 4 times a week. So there we are, this is one of the verandas going round there, and you can see that she's got some lovely pot plants, and I mean pot plants. Absolutely no controls. Before 1910 you could do what you liked on the beach. 1910 it actually became part of Shoreham and people started to nosy about a bit. If we're looking up there, you see that there's Gull's Nest. Gull's Nest is now the first and only two-storey brick building on the beach. So it becomes pretty obvious where it is. It's by the church, you can see it, I'll show you in a moment. Just by it, of course, is the site of Sam Maples. We haven't got time, as I say, there's about a week's worth in here. But Eddie and I did go over and re-photograph. The hut is still where the hut always was, which was the start of Bungalow Town. Okay, so you might, this goes from being that bungalow that we saw earlier on to this, which is now a hotel. And because he was in the horse racing trade, loads of jockeys, everybody else came down to visit him. And they stayed there. Lots of other things happened there as well, as we'll see in a moment. And eventually, musical stars began to arrive. Now, Bungalow Town really is split into four bits. There's four eras of Bungalow Town. Ned Walters writes about the middle bit. So we're looking at the first bit, which is down the West Beach. Then we get another rebuilding, which comes up to probably to the 1920s. And then from the 1920s, we get a few stars move in, which is Bungalow Town 3. Then post-war, we get Bungalow Town 4. And then if you count the boats, we've got Bungalow Town 5. It's like a never-ending story, isn't it? Okay, so there's Gordon Richards. Gordon Richards would come down on a regular basis. And he would bring other friends with him. The Scott Paynes over this side would invite other people in the Campbells, for example. They would all come down, spend time at Dolphin Lodge, go over the beach and talk speedboats and aeroplanes and all sorts. So the beach was full of people with loads and loads of different and very diverse talents. Okay, now this is the Miniature Follies. Now, this is quite interesting because Mr. Winton, who usually was very accurate with what he did, the building that is next to did not exist in 1912, so it's a mistake. He's actually got it on August the 12th, 1922. So there we are, we've got this right next to the back end of Gull's Nest, but we've now got the children involved. Everybody was involved in this, sort of show and tell thing, if you like. And they would put on all sorts of little plays and acts, and they would invite people over from the beach, sit people outside. If it got too big, then they'd go down the fort because there was plenty of room and it was an ideal place to meet. There were other fields because all the middle bit, if you like, from Ferry Road this way wasn't developed, and so there were quite large tracts of open land anyway. So there we are, this is the Miniature Follies. Similar sort of things going along in Brighton. We've got the Shepherd's Troupe and so on. So this is beach entertainment. So it's not just peculiar to us. And there we are. So William Winton and Frank Rowe spent a lot of time over on the beach photographing stars walking about doing their thing. Obviously at night it would have been good if they'd have taken a few postcards, but they didn't. So we have to use our imagination. But yeah, I mean, the things that he took were quite diverse. He also had a licence to go up to the camp. So William Winton, in his shop, in his shop in the day, I think might have been like a kid in a sweet shop. Fantastic. The Wintons were very important, if you like, in entertainment in Shoreham. This is the Wintons, they're up on the hill. But the Wintons every year, because they had a London base and they had a Shoreham base, used to swap over. The Shoreham base used to go to London, and the London base used to come down here for the weekend, which was great. The other thing that the Wintons used to do is every year, the Wintons used to put on a carnival. When the regatta moved to the river, it brought loads of people into the pubs and the streets, and they put on what would normally be just a normal parade. And these pictures, I mean, this is, they started around 1912 and they went on until 1923, 24. And one of the most important things was Winton's Menagerie. Everybody wanted to see Winton's Menagerie, people dressed up as animals. And I reckon that because people like Will Evans and so on, they saw this on a regular basis. And it's not too difficult to go from that to the showman's dream, is it? They're already got the seeds of what goes on. The other bit, of course, is that they had what they called Winton's Aquatic. Now this involved everybody in the beach. People would hire out their verandas. We're talking about some quite lavish bungalows, and people would hire out verandas and whatever so that they could watch the water sports. And it's quite interesting because up here we've got Miss Suter and then all dressed up as ducks for some reason. The other thing is that whenever they had a thing which went on into the evening, then all these glass jars were filled with candles and lights. You have to use your imagination. It's really quite fantastic, isn't it? Right, well, what's all this about? Well, the Day of Smiths, they fascinated me. And I discovered they left Southampton on the 22nd of January 1932 for a cruise to the West Indies while they were living at Gold's Nest. You don't go off on a cruise to the West Indies if you ain't got a lot of cash. And so we know that the Day of Smiths obviously were doing very, very well in their hotel trade on the beach. And then I found they came back. Now I don't believe that these are two of the same thing, because they go out, there's about three and a half years between them. But they came back into Southampton on 10th of March 1935. But Joan isn't there. And the interesting thing is that they're now living in Wharf House in Hove. So, the story. There was this horrible Australian woman who needed somewhere to live. Mum wasn't too good with the salt air, so they moved to Hove for Mum's health. And they rented the house out to this big, blustery Australian woman, whose name was Florrie Ford, who trashed the place, we are told. See where we're going with this, can't you? You can see why I scratched my head out. An hour and a half, 2 hours ago now, I was sitting in my kitchen thinking, God, where are we going with this? Anyway, there we are, there's Florrie Ford. There's Florrie Ford in her burlesque. I wonder if she appeared in the Rhodesia. I don't know, can't prove it, but that's quite some costume, isn't it? Florrie Ford, bless her heart. Anyway, Florrie Ford, there was, as soon as Ferry Road was established, and I've missed a chunk out, from the 1700s, 5 people were given licences to take bathing huts onto the beach. They were also given permission to make a 20-foot wide path, which would allow them to carry people down to the sea. That's Ferry Road. So that's Ferry Road before there was a Ferry Road. Ferry Road was the end, if you like, of the second part of Bungalow Town. Anyway, apart from one or two other buildings, I'll show you one in a minute, it shows it a bit bare. But you see there, Flo's Beach Club, the advert, don't doze, go to Flo's and all this lot. Originally it was Arthur Godfrey's Beach Club. Beach clubs, they mean a lot of different things, depending how you look at beach clubs. Same with pyjama parties. Pyjamas aren't optional. There were quite a few members-only dues. We'll see why in a minute. So we've got Flo's Beach Club. This is Ely and Ayton. They were estate agents on the beach. Then we've got Flo's Beach Club. Then there's another club next to that. And behind that is the tennis club. This is where it's all happening. This is the centre of the beach, if you like. It says there clip, so I will.
I've got a treat in store for you. I want you all to know. We're going back many years to the days of long ago, when songs I sang were popular, a dream to every ear. So now we start with one of the best. She's a lad from Lancashire.
You sing along if you want, I don't care. I'm going to speed on a little bit to about there. She's definitely not all skin and bone there, is she? And so on. Sorry about the sound and vision because it's not really. Another interesting family that lived on the beach were the Melville brothers, with a grandson who lived in Port Slade, Andrew. The one thing they all had in common is that they were proprietors of the Grand Theatre in Brighton. So there are connections. I mean, if you go all over the beach, you can make loads of connections. And there we've got Mr. Melville, and next door to him is Florrie Ford. This bloke here is called Harry Tate, and this weird-looking character here is Mr. Beerbone Tree. And then behind it, proof that I came from sort of grand settings, there's my mum. She's a butterfly. She was a tiller girl. I don't mean she worked on the river. She was a tiller girl. She had nice legs in her time before I ruined them. And there she is as a butterfly. So she appeared at the Grand. So I do know a little bit about some of the things that went on. Anyway, so there's Flo in her working attire, if you like, filling the Grand. Brighton and Shoreham were totally different places. The bit in between, it would have taken you ages to get here. So having gone to Brighton and been wound up and really enjoyed the entertainment, to go to the beach and have even more was great. It's a fabulous place. And there we are, this is inside Flo's nightclub. So there we have Major Sexton, Florrie Ford. Quite well decorated. I mean, all of the times of the year that ought to be celebrated were celebrated. Easter, Christmas, everything else. But it was a members-only club. And this is it. This is what you would have seen inside. It went on great for some years, but then I suppose it must have started to lose money, and they started to look for other things to do. And so Showboat appeared. Quite interesting, moored up near the pier. But this is the back of the card. This is one of Eddie's. Harold Snelling says, I'm in Shoreham, you just can't fall far without coming across the name. Puller Steamer Alexandra, it's more interesting about the footbridge. This was a short-lived project in the mid-30s for a floating nightclub that could go outside the 3-mile limit and open all hours. So you could get tanked up in florries and then you could have a good night out, as far out as you like. Nobody could hear you or see you at sea. Now that is something, isn't it? And of course the boat itself was quite an exciting thing to be on. Unfortunately, Florrie forgot to pay for it. She forgot about harbour dues, and eventually it was towed out. And one of the only occasions I opened the footbridge was to tow it away. So I'm not so sure that worked all that well. Perhaps she came out of the nightclub business just after that. There is no record as to how many people fell over the edge of the railings. Right, now if this works, it'll be great. We're going on to KD to Fruit. You don't know what it is, but I do. Okay. The only way onto the beach, apart from coming up from Beach Green, which wasn't very good because it was a pond, was to come down a little track which was marked by some gates opposite Old Salt's farm. And that became King's Drive. So we're coming down to the 200 odd bungalows that ended up between King's Drive and the bottom end. So that is King's Drive. You can see that there was quite a bit of horse traffic, which was quite good because you could actually grow things on the beach if you were lucky. Usually a path was, the people that made willow hurdles and everything else did really well, hazel hurdles, because all the baskets and everything else was all hazel hurdles. Your fence was a hazel hurdle and you walked on duckboards. I put that in there because not many people realise that parts of the beach, we got regular fun fairs. It's a spin-off, if you like, from the days of the Swiss Gardens when the Sanger brothers, Lord Sanger and Barnum and Bailey were invited to come down. I dare say that somewhere in his collection he's got photographs of elephants down on the hard drinking. One of the interesting things we found, we looked at some the toll keeper of the Norfolk Bridge's records for a particular day, and there was something like 2,500 bikes. And we wondered what was going on. Well, people had obviously come from miles around to go to the circus, the fair and the circus. So there we are, that's a circus on the beach. Okay, I'll pick that one in. I put this in there just for a particular reason, because, I said about neighbourhood watch on the beach, that was quite important. I've got loads of newspaper cuttings, I just happened to pick this one. In 1911, two boys aged 13 and 15 were bound over by Shoreham magistrates for breaking into the dwelling known as White Heather, which is next door to Rob Roy. And they actually stole articles valued at £5, which was a lot then, and then stupidly went and flogged them over on the side of the river. But White Heather at that time was the South Coast Construction Company's, sort of third construction company's offices. So you don't, I dare say what they did, they found a petty cash box or something else. So there we are, Andre, Rob Roy and White Heather. I love Sam Maple must have been quite busy because he constructed nearly all the concrete stuff on the beach. He went away to Brighton Technical College and became the first superintendent of sea defences. As I say, the first bit was to build a bit along Gold's Nest, and then a lot of these were built after. Okay, so we're now at the end of King's Walk, looking down towards Gold's Nest and Rhodesia. So you can see just how far away they are from the church. Church, as I say, 1913 it was built. Just here, behind there almost, is the hut where it all started. And then by now we've got the vicarage, which is 2 railway carriages, a veranda and a roof. Things are the vicarage isn't there, no, it's all gone. This is there. Okay, and then gradually, because we're now, after 1913, between 1913 and 1920, some bungalows were starting to be rebuilt. Eventually, 1 or 2 shops, Reg Leggett's, estate agents, the post office, 1 or 2 other bits. The post office was quite interesting. Originally, the only way you knew how to get on the beach, as I say, was up this track which was called King's Drive. And just at the end of that were 2 gates which marked the entrance to the old salts, but then next to that was a post box. And eventually a chap would go in there every day and then just go out and distribute the mail. No house numbers, no names at that point, just picking up your mail from the side of the road. So then we get a post office which changes all that. We get stores moving over there. Stores on the mainland were supplying things like oil, rope, canvas, just about anything you ever wanted. Panes would be over there. The other thing, of course, is that the most important thing, grocers, drapers, furnishers, that's important if you want curtains and so on. But they were all agents for Dudney and Co. celebrated Southdown Ales and Stout in cask and bottles. Sole agent for Gilby's Wines and Spirits, Buchanan's, Stillwars and Jameson's Whiskies. Residents in Bungalow Town waited on daily, or should you trust an order with it in advance, you could be sure of having goods in the bungalow when you arrive. How about that? That was self-catering at its best, wasn't it? You came down for the weekend and it would all be there. Your booze was waiting for you. In our drapery report, we also hold a large stock of bathing requisites. As I say, they were optional, so I don't know how well they did. They might have gone out of business if that's all they did. Probably bathing hats just to keep the rubbish and things out of there. Oh. So there we are, this is King's Drive now. There's the massive shopping centre that developed. You notice there's a place there, films, because nearly everybody who came down to the beach, Mr. Winton and so on, would tell them all about films. He actually provided somewhere where you could buy films. So there's loads of films. Where are they? Actually, in the 30s, movies were all the rage. I haven't seen that many. I've seen 1 or 2, but not that many. Okay, then, after 1913, we're getting aircraft running around the place. And it became quite fashionable. This is the waterworks. It became quite fashionable to have your bungalow photographed. So we're talking now between King's Drive and Ferry Road. It's not, it's just a veneer, if you like, along the coast. By now we have got a waterworks, but there's no water to houses. There's no sewage at this time. Basically, it was old Joe coming around with the lavender cart, picking it up, putting it in the barge and taking it out to sea, and then hoping he got back before it did. There was another wonderful character, looking at all the booze floating around, Methylated Maggie. She used to be totally sort of black from head to foot and sit there and just tell you a fortune all day long, and then if you bought her a drink or go to some mess, she was quite happy, I suppose. I don't know, but yeah, there were. And And then, of course, this is from the 20s onwards, we start to get some development, which is coming up along to Ferry Ruck, which is where we're heading now. The ferry, well, that's pretty obvious. The ferry could get across at quite a few stakes of the tide. It would cost you more. The tide was running strong and you had to get across where there was a problem. The other interesting thing is that, as you'll see in a moment, the beach wasn't short of musical instruments, and pianos would be taken across in a boat. So I don't know how many pianos didn't quite make it. I have photographs of when the storm hit in 1913 of people with pianos in boats leaving, but it would have been quite amusing to see them coming in boats. Ferry Road then, here we are, growing up. So we know that Flo's Club's at the bottom. We've now got a stores, nothing much on the east side. And then this is quite interesting because this is Ferry Road with not a lot in it. Those bungalows, they look sort of block built. I don't know too much about them, quite interesting, but what that is the end of, I don't know. But I said behind it we have loads and loads of tennis courts. And tennis, right from the far end of the beach, as you'll see, the Daya Smiths had a tennis court, and at the end of that was the film studio. Pretty obvious that tennis balls didn't hit the film studio, otherwise far enough away for people not to hit it. But don't forget, we're talking about a time when posh women on the beach would be chaperoned. There were schools, but basically they couldn't get rid of the chaperone until they joined the tennis club. That was the thing. You'd arrive, it was quite a posh affair. And as you can see, the courts were quite large. They took up a lot of ground. And this is a nice one. This is one of yours. This is the tennis club. Cricket, I don't know. I haven't seen pictures of cricket on the beach. Maybe there was. Maybe they lost a little balls and couldn't be done. The Pebble Tea Lounge, eventually taken over by Fred Batten. Fred Batten originally brought his milk cart over onto the beach. Don't forget, they had to pay a toll if they went over the Norfolk Bridge, and that was the main way onto the beach. We're talking about 1921 when the footbridge comes along. And I don't know, Fred Batten could probably just get his milk pram across the bridge. But eventually he decided to open up his own dairy. So there we are, there's Pebble Tea Lounge. Right next door to the second club. And a branch of the Devonshire Dairy, Fred Batten, the Pebble Tea Lounge. And obviously it caters for people, day trippers if you like, who get across on the bridge. There's Bungalow stores, people going out on trades bikes. And now, by now, Mr. Eva's moved over there. High-class grocers and provisions, coffee a speciality. That's the alternative to all the other booze, I suppose. Branches at Bungalow stores, Brunswick Road and New Road. And then, at the end of the 30s, we're starting to build up to the west. Still haven't got a pub there yet. So we're getting a different type of client now. We're getting the type of client that is coming across to bathe. 1938, the Lido's opened. The Lido had 78 chalets and it was a proper bathing station. 1914, the army came over to bathe. And so now there are amenities on the beach which are drawing people in. So obviously there's a better range of shops. And I suppose there are more people thinking that this might be the kind of life for them. Silver Jubilee 1935, Sunny Snaps, this is one of those local photographs. The lady on the left is a local painter. It gives you some idea of the sort of, on a lovely day like this, people will be flocking to the beach. The beach would be quite full of bodies enjoying themselves. And then, of course, post-war, it looks a bit rough because all the stuff has been cleared away. Where Atlantic Court and so on is. And the buildings on the other side are looking a bit tired. Now, most of those, obviously, have gone back to being houses. But we have got a pub. So, and of course, looking at that, it's probably a Vauxhall, so we're looking at, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s probably. Right, let me just check. Okay, got a bit of time, so what we'll do is we'll start here. And we're going to start at the end of Ferry Road, at this a building called Pavlova. So Mary Loftus was one of these people, probably as a result of coming down to the Grand. People normally got introduced to the beach. People just didn't want to come down from London and say, oh, look. Although it's fame had spread, they came over usually with the party. So Mary Loftus, musical artist, came over at the beginning, it says there, at the beginning of the 20th century she was a musical artist. And she came down to start the sort of 20s, 30s colony, if you like, bringing other people in. So Pavlova, as Mary, all these people have their own songs. Sister Mary Wants to Know, that was what he said, didn't take long to do, don't know what that was. There's a nice one, somebody knows. There you go. So we get Mary Loftus and her daughter Sissy. They were all of the stage family. Her father was also on the stage. She became a burlesque star, as the Sarah Bernhardt of the Halls. I'm glad she wasn't, because Sarah Bernhardt lost her leg after jumping off a balcony during La Tosca. She lost her leg a few years later, so it's a good job she didn't do that. So we've now got some Glaswegians down here, and Patty Loftus, or Patty Gray, who we interviewed some years ago, was saying that her aunt, as a girl, she visited her aunt in the bungalow Cecilia, named after her aunt's famous daughter Cecilia Loftus. Mary built her Pavlova, and then Cecilia was built next to her. He said there were only 5 bungalows at that time, one called Lullaby, the next one owned by some French people, next was Cecilia, then another one was one called Kingsville. Mrs Gray was married to Monsieur Eddie Gray, who often performed with the Crazy Gang. Monsieur Eddie Gray, the Crazy Gang, all did things on the beach. They all did things in Brighton Music Hall. There we are, there's Monsieur Eddie Gray. And the Crazy Gang. Norton and Gold, Flanagan and Allen, Monsieur Eddie Gray, they're all, you know, Nervo and Knox, all famous 30 stars that go right around to the 50s. Now, bear with me with the quality of these clips. This one is somebody machine gunning it. No, you'll have to put up with it, I'm afraid. But what a lot of people didn't realise, that Monsieur Eddie Gray and his brother were actually top-class, world-class jugglers. And this is an act that he would do. So I'll put it out of his misery in a minute. In fact, I'll put it out of his misery now, because I'm going to show you that clip. This is Eddie and his brother.
These boys are the Grays, who happen to own quite a number of clubs and work hard to keep them going. I say, old man, I'm in the wrong club.
The interesting thing is that these people were around to talk to up until not that long ago. You know, when we spoke to Patty Gray, he hadn't been gone very long. Now the last clip.
Yeah, I've got to. Here, take that board away. Don't let it sink.
Is him on his own? It's probably not as sophisticated as we used to.
Now, all you do is take the time. Now, go. a favour. What are you laughing at? What was it? What did I say? What was it? Did I say something to you enough? Or what was it? Yeah, no, really. So would you kindly help me and the dog? Would you all kindly stand up for just a couple of seconds, everybody, please? Come on, now, everybody, be small, don't you come? Come on,
Audience participation.
Yeah,
If you'd have seen him around the street, obviously you wouldn't have recognised him because he didn't have his moustache on. Okay, so there's Cecilia and Pavlova. Why anybody want to name their bungalow after a sticky meringue? I don't know. You see what I mean about the gates and the wattle fences and so on the beach. So Pavlova really sort of started from Ferry Road along towards the fort. That's the front view of Pavlova. You can see that it's very large, very spacious inside, and of course she used to put up quite a few number of people and families would stay in the bungalow. Not always when she was there. As I mentioned earlier on, there's plenty of musicians on the beach, and Sunday would either be playing cards. These people had quite a bit of money and they would lose for phenomenal amounts of cash. Because that's all there was to do. The clips that we just said, I mean, not that sophisticated according to our taste today, but this all reflects the sort of simplicity of the life on the beach, which is what a lot of people obviously wanted. Now, people would write their own music on the beach, they would play their own instruments, they would perform their latest song and try it out before they tried it out at the theatre. So it was quite a good testing ground. Another person who got down on the beach, here we are, that is, who is it? Alfred Hitchcock. There you go. There were quite a few male and female impersonators. I haven't got time to go through them all. But this is Winifred Ems, better known as Hetty King. And she was a singer, an entertainer, and she was very well known in the musicals. The musicals, if you watch the recreations of the old time musicals, the theatres, they had their own songs people would sing along with. People were requested by their songs, not necessarily themselves. So yeah, let's see what Hetty King can do. There are some bits of film which are not particularly good because they're off of Cafe Preview. But the one on the left is not a bloke, it's Hetty King.
Yesterday was my birthday. Oh, what a day was yesterday. All my pals were there. Each one getting right. But all that I remember, I kept to staying on the night.
You can see there that she's singing to a group of wounded soldiers in their hospital blues. And obviously during the First World War, a lot of the people who lived on the beach would go off to entertain people at the camp. Quite often the songs would reflect the sort of social things of the day. It's quite a good song, isn't it? We can do that in a minute.
Let us all remain. Let your old champagne. Don't fill 'em up. Put 'em down and fill 'em up again. Don't stop, oh, don't stop. I love to hear the folk go, oh, oh, oh. The
can see why people wanted to come over on the beach, can't you? Because there was loads of cross-dressing, you could be whatever you wanted to be, and nobody would bother you. The Lupino family, they lived in Hove, Lupino Lane, or Nipper, as he was known. Lived on until 1959, still doing everything he could, playing similar roles to those he played. He was a very Jeeves character. I'm going to play this clip. You've got to listen to it a bit, but it's quite interesting because it involves somebody else who is important to the beach. Will Evans, like Stanley Lupino and Will Evans.
One of those men doing I won't have to get them out. Will you men go and stay out of here? All right, you can bring the room and stop the snow. Now, follow up coming out. I want to put this blind down and put the carpet down. I don't need to put the carpet down first. No, I don't. I want to put the blind up first. I'm not put the blind up and put the carpet down. But I can't put the carpet down, but I put the blind up. Yes, but if you put the carpet down first, you'll think you put the blind up. But put the blind. No, go on. Put the carpet down. I put the blind up. And I'll put the blind up. All right, put the carpet down.
And so it goes on. Will Evans basically was into sketches, and these sort of sketches, which were just sort of banter, are the kind of things that we listen to on the radio every Sunday. It used to be Grub, Two-Way Family Favourites, and then something like Round the Horn or whatever, which are all these kind of sketches. So the Lane family, the Lupino family rather, married into the Lane family. This is Harry Lupino with Nipper Lane. And Ida Lupino, of course, is still one of them. Ida Lupino, very famous, went on, made a large number of very popular films. Again, would be seen around the beach. This one I thought about, Billy Williams. The reason I put Billy Williams in, he had a couple of bungalows. He had Emu and Kangaroo, who had they were rebuilt. But he again was a friend of Florrie Ford. Started off in a place called Kalgoorlie. You know, a couple of trees and a kangaroo, that's Kalgoorlie. But he had a trademark. He was the man in the velvet suit, and he's buried up in the cemetery in Shoreham. But I thought I'd put this in. I thought very hard about this. The song he's going to sing is extremely topical to today, and you'll see why in a moment. As I say, basically their songs, they sang about things that people wanted to know about. They were things that people were quite emphatic to try and get across. You know, things like Any Old Eye, My Old Man's a Dustman would get people going. But there were other songs which were, I suppose, a bit more deep-rooted. So here we go, here's Billy Williams.
All England, by kind permission of Lord George.
You can sing along, the music's in.
Why, the Britain used to vote his home that was in Hampton land, until a foreigner came here and lost his happy land. He worked his way to our midst and captured all the trade. So everything we use now seems to be all common made. So for England is the in the picture, everything is for a new agree. The table and the chair, the carpet on the stairs, were laid in Germany. But when I go out into the garden, growing in the tiny plot, is a pretty little rose, and in the garden grows the only bit of English that we got. That's what I do.
Very famous picture.
When we cut the bread and butter, it's all foreign, you agree. Why, the flour comes from Russia, and the knife from Germany. Our butter comes from Holland, and our new laid eggs from France. Our tea we get from China, so we don't stand half a cup. So for England is the picture, everything is for a new
So there you go. I mean, nothing more topical than topics, is there? Think what you like. Our economy really revolves around retail. And so if you really want to do your little bit, when I've finished, you get up to the bar and you buy as much beer as you can. Make sure that you get out during the week and buy some shoes and some clothes and things, because that's keeping us going, basically, because we don't make anything anymore.
But English beer.
But there you go.
English.
Oh yeah, English beer. If you can find any, buy English, yes. But the beer doesn't come very far. Another one, Grant Washburn. He appeared over on the beach in films. He went on till 1963 acting. He's their sort of cusp. I don't have a clip of what he did, fortunately. Another person who appeared here, Wilkie Bard. You know, pantomime in the theatres, Brighton, whether it be Brighton, whether it be the Connaught, whatever, pantomime every year was important. And certain stars were just earmarked to play, in the bottom one, Widow Twankey, but to play vaudeville and music as a day job, and to be either the dame or the butt of fun in the pantomimes. So this is Wilkie Bard. Wilkie Bard, 1844 we started to get gramophones. By about the 1890s, the turn of the century, we get records. And all these new stars are very keen to try and get into record, because recording, as soon as gramophones appeared on the beach, that's basically what they had to enjoy. So people would bring down the latest, you know, the top 10 from London, and they'd be played on the beach. And Wilkie Bard was one of those they played.
Detective viewers, the Colonel speaking to you live from Grange Christian
We don't want to know about the Colonel, so...
Master's voice record. O, capital O. Chrysanthemums had surely were all when...
So this is Wilkie Bard. I'll spare you the rest of it, but basically what he's doing is saying he wants to sing an opera, and it's pretty obvious that he ain't going to do that, is he? So a lot of these early comedians and musical artists really were there putting themselves down. That was their humour. And here's one, Ernie Main. Ernie Main, larger than life character, had a couple of bungalows on the beach, weighed about 20 stone, used to sing a song called Fried Fruit Fritters. He gained interest in comedy when people laughed at him for his overweight antics, but one of his songs, What Do You Think of That?, is the basis for Lonnie Donegan's My Old Man's a Dustman. So basically it's the same tune, they just changed the words. So Ernie Main could be seen on the beach, but Ernie Main could also be seen elsewhere, like he ran the Hebe pub. And there we are, this is Ernie Hebe. And there's everybody coming out of the garage, all keen to fill up at Ernie's. So Ernie Main, Bungalow, you may have heard of his simplicity, but he also had Kangaroo in Lillern. And you know that earlier on I said that Billy Williams had a bungalow called Kangaroo. So there we are, that's the Hebe pub, no longer there, it's the Victoria Court. And that is Ernie Main. And that unfortunately is where we must leave it. But it's very apt that we should end up at a pub. And by all means, now crowd at the bar, and then later on you shall have some music. But thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, just like to say thanks for a fantastic talk by Trevor. There will be little welly boots going round to show your appreciation for the chat and everything. And as Trevor said, we're going to have a bit of old time, well, Wob on the ukulele playing some old tunes from the 20s and 30s. And we've got Martin and Blondie, who are going to do their first ever revival of Old Time Music Hall. That will be starting around about 3:30 as soon as they're set up. So, yeah, again, thanks again. Cheers.